We spent a bit of time at our table at lunch engaging in some maybe low-rent political punditry. It was very fun, but I won't ask you about the election, but I do want to ask you about something that Levi's has done over the years, which is engage in public policy dialogues to help move forward on labor and environmental issues. For example, Levi's has on occasion called for labor and environmental standards to be inserted into trade agreements.
Yes.
Why do you take that approach? And without calling out others, why do you think you're, if not alone, in a minority of companies in taking that step?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that we truly are a global company. We're in 110 countries around the world, as I mentioned earlier on. Our split is about 50-50 US, 50% outside the US, and quite frankly, I think while our US business will continue to grow, our real growth is going to be outside the US. No surprise. India's, China's, Russia's, Middle East, Turkey, great opportunities as this new middle class comes through. We do work with governments because we believe this can be a win-win. The interesting thing we've found that you go to many of these countries today, the labour laws are in place. The environmental laws are in place. Just because a country doesn't enforce them, you shouldn't let them off the hook. We go to the place, we'll always go to the highest common denominator. And an example in case will be China. We've only recently gone into China. We entered the Chinese market as a standalone business about 7 years ago, and I was involved in leading us into that. And I remember as we were looking to enter into China, people coming to me and say, John, it can be really quick. No one obeys the laws here, so don't worry about that. Just do what you have to do. And we went, no, that's not the way we operate. We need to know what the laws are. We need to know what the labour standards are, what the environmental standards are, and we will not compromise. Now, I can tell you it cost me and the company a lot of money. It took us almost 2 years longer to enter the Chinese market. But I can sleep extremely comfortably every night knowing it's the right thing to do. Through that, we can now work with the Chinese government, and we are, because we can clearly look them in the face and say, hey, we were there before you were there. And we're working with them now, and you know what? Most governments want to do this. If you will go up and be totally transparent with them and say, we're going to help you, we're willing to support you, they do listen. And some of the issues we're dealing with China now, for instance, not just environmental, believe it or not, the Chinese have a higher standard for inks used on the prints of T-shirts. You wouldn't believe that. Higher than many countries outside of China. We have issues where we were sourcing in China and we didn't realise how high their standards were. We haven't tried to talk them out of their standards. We just want to understand and make sure we align to that. So I think if you work with the governments, if you work with NGOs, if you work with the trade unions, it's a win-win. Because all we're trying to do is to get these countries to a level where every country is today. And I'd much rather be ahead of that curve than have to react to it later on. It's a little selfish, but it's the smart thing to do. And I think it is important to know you're doing the right thing, you're not going to get any surprises. And once again, it aligns with the values of our company. So we'll continue doing that. I think there was a classic example in Jordan, where the US and Jordan, together we aligned on some of the, they got favoured trade to bring products in, but it was linked to labour laws. And we were seeing some of these labour laws weren't being implemented. And we talked to the US government and we talked to Jordan together with some of the NGOs. Guess what? Everyone stepped up and resolved it. Wow. That's powerful. And so I think our point of view will always be, let's try and link these things together. Not just labour laws, but the environmental laws. Because I think the environment's another big one that's coming down, and we need to pay a lot of attention, just the amount of water, chemicals that are going into these waste disposal situations. And we've got to get governments to understand that, because the sooner they fix it up, the cheaper it's going to be to resolve it later on.
So in the Jordan case, it was easier for Levi's to act in the situation because there was a trade deal that included labor laws.
And quite frankly, we didn't have to do it all ourselves. Mm-hmm. We could just go, come on, guys, you've signed the laws, we're just holding you accountable. This is the law. And the response was very good. Okay, we weren't aware of this, we'll fix it up. And they did.
You spent a lot of your career in Asia Pacific. You ran Levi's Asia Pacific for a while. What do you think the entry of these markets that you're talking about from there and other parts of the world will do with respect to the corporate responsibility agenda? Are the concerns the same across Asia Pacific in your experience, or is it different?
Well, before I answer that, it's been fascinating being an Australian watching the elections over the last 2 years. You guys really do go at it. 2 years to elect someone, fine, you got there.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing. It is an amazingly powerful decision and one that everyone in this room should feel just terrific about. America is still seen externally as a great place of hope, freedom and opportunity. I think most countries, and because I was a part of them, would have said, might have lost the way over the last few years, but the dream of what the US stood for, that's never been lost. There can be issues with leadership at any point in time. I think now's a time where I think you'll be surprised how countries outside the US are going to react to the new elected leader. Having said that, this guy better walk the talk, and I'm sure he will. But what a great opportunity, because I think it shows to everybody change is possible. Anything can happen if you truly galvanise people behind the dream. I say that because countries outside the US aspire to what the US stands for. They aspire to the freedom, the hope, the opportunity, the fact that you can own 6 cars, all those other conspicuous consumption things that we all take for granted. Hopefully, the rest of the world won't get to that extent. But it is inevitable that the emerging middle class in these countries is going to enjoy the benefits of what freedom can offer them, of what a democracy can offer them. So to me, I think we need to pay even more attention. Because one of the things that also happens in many of these countries, there is no social network. In many cases, the family is the social network. There's no such things as 401ks. Most of the governments there are not focused on necessarily environmental issues, because remember, democracy is quite new. And you don't go from either a dictatorship or a communist point of view to a democracy overnight, as much as we'd like countries to do that. It's a generational shift. So I think for us, we would say we can really make a difference here. We can help, we can have a point of view, we have been doing a lot. But I think if everybody gets together and recognises that the new emerging countries are the future. These are an enormous amount of people that are coming on stream. And if we can help these countries aspire to the democratic beliefs we have, if we can help these countries be successful, make democracy be successful, and get ahead of some of the things we've learnt the hard way, I think it's a great opportunity.